Welcome to another episode of Unapologetic Leadership, where I have Renée Heywood, who is currently the CEO of South Shore Stars, and she helps lead this organization dedicated to helping children, youth, families thrive through education, empowerment, and community connection, along with her own company, Real Talk Leaderships, where she works with school districts and other organizations to help bring leadership concepts and team cohesion. Welcome, Renée.
Thank you for having me, Cory.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. So tell us about what you do, what's important to you, and how you help people.
Hmm. I think the common theme is really supporting the next up leaders, and that's in everything that I do. The work that I do at South Shore Stars, it's focusing on young children and after school programs and
Mhm.
really providing opportunities for equitable education and preparing the adults to support the kids in that. So, I mean, wherever I am, I'm looking to support those next leaders. So, the same happens with Real Talk Leadership, mentoring principals, et cetera. And how do they build a positive team that can really rally around the students so that the work can be student centered? So, I guess in terms of, the impact that I make is helping leaders to just be confident in who they are, not having to fit the mold or be like anyone else. I think that's where my freedom is. I've realized that being myself and not having to worry about matching up with someone else's standards of what leadership looks like, that suits me well, it serves me well, and so I want that same freedom for other leaders. And so however that is, to point out this is the great thing that you have that will shift an organization or that will bring joy in a place that there's heaviness. That's really what we can leverage and capitalize on, so that you can make a great school, have a great work environment for your folks.
I think that's awesome. And just to have this self leadership and using some of our values that we have and strengths, because I know growing up, I've been in the workforce for 40 years this year, and I haven't really leaned on many of the strengths that I currently now know are strengths. I always looked at them as a weakness. So I've had been introverted, I've had imposter syndrome, I've looked through the lens of fear, and some of my strengths I realize come from my faith, which I'm a Christian, and they come through God. And I've just never leaned on that. I've said, "Oh, let me focus on the faiths and focus all my energy and attention on that." And then as I've looked back and reflected, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I have a lot of strengths that I've been utilizing and I'm very good at, but it's taken some mentors, coaches, and good friends
Yeah.
to be able to pour into me and just to clarify some of these things along with, prayer and reflection and things." So how do you go about finding out what are strengths that people have that can be of benefit to their organization or to their lives?
So I do a lot of watching. I love people watching. I love watching folks interact with each other. I don't know. There's just something about that. You kind of collect a lot of data. You can see the introvert, you can see the extrovert, you can see those who are not as confident. And I'm not doing it in a spooky way. It's just a natural thing that I do. And so I don't know. I have lots of conversations as well. I like to meet one on one with folks just to hear what they think their needs are, and then I can add to that by what I see
Mhm.
is that need, and I just support them in that. Giving them opportunities to show where their special gifts can really come into play, and then having a debrief afterwards. How do you think that went? What do you think can be better? How can I support you? What else do you need? And so I think that that's really how I go about that.
I think that's amazing. And two things you said basically for leadership and some areas are that I've had to even work on too is listening
Hmm.
and then asking great, powerful questions. And
Yeah.
I know not just asking great, powerful questions, because some people have done that, but then they're not really listening to the answer. They say, "Hey, I checked the box. I asked some questions." So how did you come about with developing these skill sets of asking great questions and listening to your
Mhm.
journey?
So my husband and I have been doing marriage counseling for about 25 years. So we've had lots of couples come to our couch and, trying to help them kind of sift through lots of difficult issues. And so in that context, you have to listen. And you can't just listen just to have a response. We teach people, don't do that. Listen to understand because you're trying to get to a certain goal. And so, I think it's key to listen to people. What are they actually saying? What are they not saying? A lot of times you get a lot of data from what people do not say, because that tells you their comfort level as well. And so that's how I've developed those listening skills,
Hmm.
being okay in the silence as well, because a lot of folks feel they need to fill the air with words and questions and all of that. And it doesn't really serve you well, because there you have to let the words soak in, take a moment to reflect on what is being said. And so that's an important skill that I've continued to work with everyone that I deal with on, because I apply it to my own life.
I think that's great. One of my superpowers is listening because I've had that introverted side
Mm-hmm.
and fear of talking and didn't want to sound stupid. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been a great listener, and I still have that as a gift. And I had one of my coaches tell me that recently. He's like, Cory, you're so comfortable with just listening. It's important for you to also contribute in conversations. But just with that listening side of thing and being patient, as you
Mm-hmm.
said, to really listen and take the time. Because when you ask somebody a question, especially a thoughtful or deep question, they're not going to always have the answer immediately off the tip of their tongue of what
Mm-hmm.
that is. So I can appreciate having that patience. And you also mentioned marriage counseling. I've been married 26 years, and I've been in marriage counseling. I haven't coached other people on it, but we've had challenges, me and my wife, but 26 years as of 2025, just about 5, 6 months ago. And it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes intention
Yep.
and love,
Mm-hmm.
which is not, I heard a recent pastor say, love is not a feeling. It's a
Mm-hmm.
choice. It's a choice. It's a
Right.
choice. So
Right.
tell me a little bit about, if you don't mind sharing, how long you've been married and what called you into this presence of doing marriage counseling. How did that come about?
So my husband and I will be married 35 years in May.
Congrats.
Yeah, I know. We've been together a very long time.
Yeah,
We
that's
met
amazing.
in our church in our neighborhood. And so we got called to marriage ministry, I think, because people would just see us and ask questions. And we started a marriage ministry at our church a long time ago, and have still been doing the same thing, at least for 25 years. So I think it's been longer than that. And in that process, we wrote a book called I Said I Do to All That, Unpacking Life's Baggage, because we were finding that couples, they, as we were talking with them, there was not a resource that would help us to
Mm.
address the needs. And when you're trying to put two people together in any group, whenever you're trying to just kind of, mesh more than one person together, there's going to be challenges because we're raised differently. And so, again, I apply all that to the group dynamic as well. How do you become one when you've always lived as two? You've been raised as two, and there's cultural differences, there's life experiences, there's all kinds of things, family, all of that that comes into play. And again,
Mhm.
it also falls into us as a team at work. How do we kind of navigate that traffic with each other? And so, since we didn't find it, we wrote it. And what we did is we created something that we thought was going to be a workshop that was going to be about 6 or 7 weeks, because we had 7 topics, and it ended up lasting a year,
Oh,
because we
wow.
dug in so deeply, and we never wrote anything formally to publish it. And during COVID, we decided to publish it about 20 something years later, because we had learned so much, especially doing the marriage counseling with other couples. And so we added that into, the book as well, and published that. I want to say it was 19 on 2020. I mean,
Oh, it's
um,
one.
and
Yeah.
so it's on Amazon. And, the people who've gone through that workshop, we had about 30 couples, and only 3 of them have decided to divorce. And the
Wow.
rest, they followed what we said, and they're still together over 20 years later.
Wow, you have, if not the best statistics and success
Yeah,
rate in either the US or the world. I don't know which one it is, but that's pretty amazing compared to I've heard 50 to 60%,
yep,
depending on what studies you show. So no, I think
right.
that's amazing. Are you able to share not necessarily what's in the workshop and how you teach it? Because I'd rather for people to get your book or contact you on that. But can you share maybe a principle that an individual would need to have or mindset or belief in
Yeah,
regards to, being on the successful side with relationships, maybe in general?
right. I think relationships require humility. When you're married to someone, all of a sudden, I don't know, everything just kind of, that's what we say, unpacking life's baggage, because, you're dating, right? And it seems to be, oh, it's wonderful. And you're showing your best self, but you can't keep up that, you can't pretend long. So
Right,
when you're
right.
married, everything just kind of falls apart. And so your marriage becomes a mirror to you. What you need to fix, what's going great, and how you become a team, how do you become a great partner, etc. And so I think that in that you need humility, because you don't have it all. And I'm a Christian, and I believe that God has called your spouse. You have been fashioned for each other,
Mm,
and there's a reason why you're with that spouse, because they are the ones. Now, God completes us, but they're the ones that can enhance what God has given us in terms of skills. So I could not be the leader that I am without my husband, because I was a more creative type, but I'm an administrator. So I can't just be, I don't know, whatever's going to happen today. No, because people are counting on me. And so my husband is like very structured, system, etc. And so he's caused me to just get some stuff done. And then I've caused him to relax a little bit, because we've been, it's a lifelong journey. Honestly, you never really fully arrive because you go through life's issues. We got together when I was in my teens, and now I'm in my 50s, getting close to 60. So imagine all of those experiences, all of the growing that we've had to do spiritually, emotionally, physically, all of that we've had to go through, and that's really where God refines us. Yeah, it's hot, sometimes, and sometimes it can hurt, but just like when you put iron in a fire, it does refine things and make something beautiful if you're willing to be in that process. If you're not, don't bother getting married. But
mm.
you have to be humble and listen for the lesson that God has for you, because otherwise you're just going to miss it, and you're wasting the time that God has put into fashioning this person for you.
Yeah, that's amazing perspective that you just mentioned that other people can bring out the best in us through God's working
Yeah.
and also humility, having that humility. And I know a long time ago, I used to think, yeah, I'm probably one of the most humble, quiet people, but inside there's a lot of turmoil and angst and being upset and anger. But I
Mm-hmm.
never really shared that outside, but just getting to the true heart of what was, or matter of what was going on in my heart was a really big thing. And how do you see, in terms of marriage, because the statistics kind of have been creeping up over the last several decades,
Yeah.
and divorce and all that kind of thing, that what's another area or belief? Because I've had some other people in our Bible study have mentioned, hey, for us, we're married for life. That's just a non-negotiable. Whereas our society, media, and our culture says that isn't necessarily the case. But is there, you mentioned humility and some other things, but is there something else that says we're going to have this enduring love and connection, similar to most people, 99% of people who have that same enduring connection with their kids? They say, my kids can do pretty bad stuff, but I'm going to weather through a lot of that and pretty much love them. I've only known of a few parents and kids who have separated or,
Mm-hmm.
had issues like that. But for the most part, we'll say, hey, my kids can do the same garbage as my spouse, but I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to keep loving my kids because I feel like I'm connected to them. But
Mm-hmm.
how is that belief different, if you even have an answer, to when we're married to somebody? And like I said, society kind of says, hey, this is temporary if it doesn't work out.
Right. Well, I see marriage through the eyes of God and what the scripture says. And God hates divorce. I mean, because look what it does. It's just harmful. I mean, you have two and you're ripping it apart. I mean, all the fibers and everything. And so if anyone who's listening has been through a divorce, that it is very challenging. And we've helped people, walk through that and try not to make that decision. But I think that commitment is really key. But it's like marriage is spiritual.
Mm.
It's not just a civic agreement. You sign the paper and it's a law and all. It's spiritual. And so going into this relationship with my husband, I heard God say, "Don't mess this up." I mean, he said it. I heard it in my heart. I did.
Yeah.
And so this is a commitment that I made, not just to my husband, but to God. And so in the midst, I remember my husband and I were having this disagreement, and it just got me. It grieved my spirit because I realized God's watching. He's right here. And I'm grieving the Holy Spirit right now. We are grieving the Holy Spirit right now because we're not on the same page here. How do we get on the same page so that we're
Right.
not grieving the Holy Spirit? I don't want to make God sad or upset with what I'm doing because I'm, not taking things seriously or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And so it was really like a shocker. Whoa, okay, this is not just two human beings. This is a spiritual joining that God has ordained, and I take that really seriously. I don't play around
Mm.
with what God has given me. God has given me a gift in my husband and all the gifts that have come from that, my kids, my grandkids. And I want to honor the gift
Hmm.
that he's given me. And so we've made that commitment to each other to do that.
Yeah, I think a couple things that stood out to me. That was an amazing share, and just the whole commitment piece of it, the relationship with God as a person, not just the universe. You're not having a relationship with the
Yep.
universe, but
Hmm.
God not as a human, as a person, as a spiritual being that loves us and
Hmm.
wants that eternal relationship, the
Yep.
ongoing forever and ever and ever, whatever that means to our limited minds.
Hmm.
And just to have that commitment, because a couple things I've shared, I've taught middle school Bible study and high school Bible study for the past 30 plus years, early 90s. And many times I'll mention that we have this relationship with God that goes on and on and on. And our life is, if you look at it, our life is like 1 second in
Hmm.
God's life. If just as an example, how God
Yeah.
can blink and our life is over 100 years or whatever that is.
Yeah.
So eternity is quite a bit longer than that. So I love how you basically have put into perspective for me as to how much our life is and how much connected we can be with God. And He knew about us. He planned for us. And
Yes.
as Scripture says, He's counted the number of hairs on our head. That's how
Hmm.
detailed
Hmm.
He is with our lives and intentional in wanting that relationship with us. So I love that idea of all of this. And shifting gears a little bit with the
Hmm.
same line of what you're talking about, relationships, and in our professional lives or these educational institutions,
Hmm.
would you say anything different in terms of the mindsets and belief with relationships with our colleagues or students that we're teaching or any of that? Is there any difference there in the commitment, the mindset, our decisions we make?
So I would still say the commitment there. Humility still. You can have all the letters at the end of your name, but that really doesn't mean much. It means, yeah, you spent some time. I enjoy being Dr. Renée Heywood. That's fine, but I don't know everything. But when I'm talking to other folks, I have to remember they are coming from a different place. And I think that having room is another thing. I spent 11 years in juvenile justice education. And so there were kids who were in there for felony murder. We had to
Hmm.
create a special unit. And these are kids that you have heard nationally that were in my program. And so even with those kids, I still had to be open and not swear them off for life. There's still grace that is extended to them as well. And I found that being just me and myself, and not worrying about, again, trying to be somebody else. They knew that I was a Christian. They knew that I had good intentions for them. And I never felt like I was, in danger and afraid of any of them. It might have been one I was a little concerned about, but, you know, there's rules. You don't turn your back to folks. And so, I never felt like I would have to worry about going to my car at night because of whatever,
Yeah.
you know, uh,
Definitely.
yeah. And so I think that when you're dealing with other students, other adults, you just have to really think about where they're coming from and make room for that. It doesn't mean that we have to believe the same thing. It doesn't mean we have to, you know, do things alike. I don't have to be like you. I don't want to be like you. I like being like me. But, I also don't want to be so dogmatic, so judgmental that you're dead to me because we are not on the same path. Because there's still things that we can learn. God spoke through a donkey. And so
Yeah.
there's still things that we can learn from each other, and you have to be open to that. I went to Brandeis University, which was a predominantly Jewish school, and I'm a Christian, and it was at Brandeis that I was able to really solidify my faith there. I had a great relationship with the rabbi. He would come hear me sing gospel music, and at the end of every concert, he'd have his arms wide open and say, "You did a great job, Renee." And I'd say, "Thank you, Rabbi Axelrad." And so we just had a mutual respect for each other because I appreciated him always making me feel welcome, and he didn't have to because he was the majority. But
Yes.
still, he wanted to make sure that I felt welcome there, and so I want to extend that same grace to other people.
That is so wonderful because you don't hear many of these stories out in the open where we love and accept. And that's a calling from God, not to
Hmm.
judge people, but
Yep.
to love and sacrifice ourselves for people and serving others and
Hmm.
love others as we love ourselves.
Right.
That's a
Right.
big different concept from what we're
Mm.
seeing out there. So I think that's
Yeah.
such a cool experience that you got to
Mm.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Mhm.
Another question I have for you is what's one of the biggest leadership lessons that has shaped your life?
So, because I like to pour into others, I love to see, that nugget of leadership in someone and just, leverage that and let's move you forward. And I moved someone forward too quickly. She was someone who was on my team, and I gave her, some extra responsibilities she was administrative. And so I wanted to kind of, grow that and develop that. So I said, why don't you lead these meetings? I'm still over the department, but I want you to kind of facilitate. And sometimes, there are groups they'll kind of rotate who facilitates meetings to give folks an opportunity. So I was doing that, but then I realized after a while I made a big mistake because she wasn't mature enough to handle that. So she thought she was in charge and giving people half a day's off. And I'm like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? You can't tell someone just to take the rest of the afternoon off. That's something I do. Um, and yeah, I said, oh gosh, I made a mistake. So I had to pull that back, and it was awkward, but I learned that I have to let people prove a little bit more, just a little longer, because my excitement for them can go ahead of what really makes sense. And I should have just paused a little bit more and been more systematic about helping to develop certain skills without giving her a platform that she wasn't mature enough to handle. Because then that can destroy someone too. You can have a gifting, but if you don't have the maturity and the integrity, that door will be open, but it's really that maturity and integrity that will keep you there. And that's what was missing. And so, yeah, now I know. I just pause, and then I address things quicker than I did before. I'm a nice person, but I found that always being too nice is not helping people. And so it's not like I have to be mean. I just have to be honest about what I'm seeing
Yes.
to help someone grow. And so I ask questions. I make less statements than I ask more questions so that people can discover themselves on their own. But my questions facilitate that. instead of being, you know, you do this or you're horrible at that. I ask, how do you think you did? You
Yeah.
know, how do you think you can improve? And then their own voice is in their head. So that when I'm not with them, their own voice is what they hear so that they can kind of self-correct. That's what I've learned from that experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. A couple of things that stood out there for me is that your mic drop of I make less statements and I ask more questions,
Hmm.
along with the whole idea of mentoring the next generation, including with some of these troubled teens and
Hmm.
in your organizations you're with. And like you're saying, you don't always know what somebody is thinking until you see their actions or what comes out of their mouth. So basically having micro tests, if you will,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
conversations to see what they're really thinking. And we
Yeah.
have to do that. And I think that's a healthy thing, especially like you said, when it's not a huge consequence or responsibility,
Hmm.
but to allow people to have some autonomy, to utilize some of their skill sets and then to gently whether you call it correcting them or helping them to understand a better way or an improved way to have a that has the best outcome or impact. So I
Yeah.
think that's huge. And when it comes to just the mentoring of other people, I mean, do you find it? You've already talked about all the different organizations where you're talking about leadership and mentoring, but do you find it's a big deal for the mentoring of the new generation because 30, 40 years ago, we used to have communities
Hmm.
who, it takes a village to raise a kid. It still does. But now, instead of kids being raised by multi generational and only have a few influences of school and home life, now
Hmm.
we've got, as I say, the internet raising
Yep.
most of our kids now and having the most influence more hours of the day. But where do you see that connection piece with the next generation and relationships and just being there and present as
Yeah.
either a mentor or a guiding force?
Right. This is perfect timing because my company closes down during that Christmas break. And so I was able to line up a few of my mentees. And so I'll just give an example. There's a young lady who she just bought a house. It's wonderful that she, was able to do that and save. I didn't know her very well back then. And I'm seeing that she's in such financial distress and working all of these jobs. And then on top of that, she just signed up for a master's program and all of these things. And
Wow.
so one day I said to her, who advises you? Like, it's not a judgment. I want to understand. And so what I'm seeing as a pattern with this generation, especially, is that they're out there on their own. Like there's no
Ooh.
adults mentoring them. No, now mentoring is you have to be intentional. So you
Hmm.
can't just give a nice encouraging word and call that person your mentee. You have to say, okay, what did you learn from our discussion now? What is it that you want to take and work on? Let's set up another time, etc. And so I've been frustrated, honestly, because they don't know customer service. They don't know how to communicate. They have no idea what to do with their finances. They have no idea how to plan out a career. Like you don't have to go to college, but let's find out what you're interested in. But that's
Hmm.
not even happening in school. And at least, before when I was, teaching, you would give an assessment, at least so you would know what are your interests? What might you go into in terms of a career? What do you want to do with your life? None of that is happening. Guidance counselors have hundreds of kids on their caseload. And so it's really the squeaky wheel that gets the attention. So there's
Yeah.
nobody. I'm just telling you, parents are busy. There's no one. They're working just so that they can buy their own clothes. Some kids are responsible for all of their own everything.
Wow.
And so I'm like, I'm really frustrated because the adults need to do better and we're not. We're too busy. So there's where the village comes in.
Yes.
Um, you need a balance. You need a male and female voice in there. As a mom, I know I can't do everything. A male like dads are important. They're huge and the world is telling them they're not. And so we need to bring that back again because there's a structure and a way that a dad brings order into a home. it's not there anymore. I'm just being honest. And so
Hmm.
that's not in the home. Okay. So where can we find someone to mentor your son? Your daughter also needs a male figure as well. And so I say that because I've been spending some time with folks over the last week and a half, just kind of understanding where they are and being intentional about that. And so that's really my impact with that next generation. I can't see you fumbling and just go, oh, well, I mean, it doesn't take that long. It could just be going out for coffee. How much does that cost?
Right.
Not much. An hour of your day for once a month. Not a big deal. So find someone, because it's just these kids don't have anybody, and they're not going to say it because they're the generation that doesn't know that they don't know.
That
They
and that's
think they know, and they
right.
don't
And
know.
yes, yes. And like you said, if they don't know that they don't know, how can they know except for somebody
Yeah,
else's intervention or
yeah.
relationship?
They're
Yes.
making decisions based on half-baked information and YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's,
So come on.
oh my gosh, yeah. No, you mentioned once again a lot of great points on mentoring that next generation and giving
Mhm.
influence. And one of the things I say a lot is I bring, since I grew up, I'm 57, grew up, was born
Oh,
in
me
six.
too.
Yeah, okay. I was born in 1968.
Yep.
And so I had some, as I call old school, from mostly my mom raising me, some old
Hmm.
school of discipline, integrity, all those types of things, and then some new school, which is just the data, social media, all that. And
Hmm.
I'm so thankful that God has been blessing our family. That all three of my young kids that are 18, 21, and 23, all
Hmm.
three of them have worked in retail establishments, which has helped some of their people skills and not to be afraid of that. And of course, they're good with tech stuff. But
Hmm.
I tell them, I say, you're going to have a better or a leg up, so to speak,
Hmm.
of a lot of your peers that don't have a lot of these communication skills, or they're not rubbing shoulders with some of the experience. I was going to say older generation, but
Hmm.
experienced generation. And not that we don't know everything, which I love your humility on that. You know, as a mom, as a doctor, you don't know everything, and I love that because a lot of us respect doctors as, oh, they tend to know everything, and we don't question them.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, we'll feel dumb instead of, hey, we're human beings, and realizing, hey, we can only know so much, and there's so much information being put out there. And one of the things, just going off on another thing you said, of kids learning on YouTube and TikTok videos, much scroll, scroll, scroll,
Yeah.
that there are so many opinions and ideas. And that was even confusing me over the last several years. I had too much input, never
Hmm.
specific, good quality input, and clarified, reduced down input. So then I could spend the other part of my time reflecting, looking at these pieces of information and how I can take action on it. Because if we're always getting all this input, okay, where do we start? As I had a conversation with another entrepreneur yesterday where he said, I have too much information coming in. He said,
Hmm.
I am capable and skilled at so many things, which I resonate with that.
Hmm.
And he said, but where do I start? What thing do I take action on? Because there's so
Right.
much that fills up our time. So I
Hmm.
appreciate your willingness to invest time with them. And like you said, a cup of coffee doesn't take much. An
Yeah.
hour of your time doesn't take much and creates such a huge impact and deep connection with people.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that's just wonderful. And yeah, so thank you for sharing all that. Another question I have for you is, how has your inner conviction played a role in how you handle fear or
Hmm.
tough decisions? You kind of mentioned some of that earlier, but
Hmm.
if you had any example, or just how does your inner conviction play a role in handling fear?
Yeah. So I found that I don't need to make decisions immediately all the time. So sometimes, I believe the enemy wants to trip me up and demanding voice to do something right now.
Mm,
And I don't believe that that's how God speaks to me. I pause and I make sure I'm hearing the right voice and I'm able to take action when I need to take action. So for me, first of all, I guess maybe it's my older age. I don't know, but I'm not really afraid of much at this point in life because, again, working in juvenile justice education and being around people sitting right next to people who have done, really bad things, but knowing the power that God has put in me, He has not given me a spirit of fear. I am able to walk confidently on this earth, knowing that I'm not walking alone, but I have a host of angels walking around me and God's presence in me. So I can't be forced to do something that I don't want to do. So I pause and reflect, and I take my time when necessary to make decisions in tough situations. The thing is, I'm who I am wherever I am. I have to be that way because I see too many people that might recognize me. And I always say, oh, geez, I'm glad I behave myself wherever I go. Because if I'm cutting up in one place and then you see me leading worship in another, I'm going to confuse you. And so I have to be the same. And, that, I don't know, I just use my faith to kind of calm and help me to listen.
That's
And
fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being on this episode, Dr. Renée Heywood. And I really appreciate all the insights that you've given.
thank you. It was so great to be here. I love this conversation. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I've learned a lot, and you've reinforced a lot for me. So this has been so valuable for me, and you're most welcome.
It's wonderful.
So I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Unapologetic Leadership, where humility is important, holding space for others, and realizing you were not given a spirit of fear.